All right, and we're live. Welcome back to another Corona Geek here, where we talk all about mobile app development using Corona SDK. I'm your host, Charles McKeever, and today we are, this is the Memorial Day crew. It's a little light today, so thanks guys for showing up. Appreciate it. Chris, you said it's raining there where you are, and that doesn't make very good for barbecue.
No, not at all. We're meeting indoors.
Yeah, exactly. It's raining here too. I figure everybody who had outdoor plans are they're inside doing something. I don't know what, but it's storming. So yeah. So thanks for being here. And I had planned to do this show by myself because I figured everybody would be out doing something else. So today, though, we're going to talk about I don't even remember now. We're going to talk about Composer GUI. Calendar events and sharing panels. So we're going to kind of just walk through basically some of the tutorials that are on Corona Labs blog and highlight some of the things that are going on there. Before we get into that, let's do some announcements. Last week, if you didn't have a chance, be sure to check out Corona Geek number 90. We talked about hackathons with Jen Looper and Brian Burton. Theo Russian Jr. recently won $10,000 at the AT&T Hackathon in Washington, D.C., and Jen and Brian gave some great advice about what to do when you participate in those events and how to present not only do the project and work together collaboratively, but also how to present your project once you're kind of to that final stage. You want to pitch it to the judges, and I thought that was an interesting talk. They really said that the technical aspects of things were part of it, but also just the presentation, business marketing piece were very important as well. So I think probably a lot of developers don't necessarily think about that part of it when they're thinking about participating in hackathons. So go check that out. Corona Geek number 90. You can find it either on youtube.com/CoronaGeek or it's over on the Corona Labs blog. Now, Chris, tell us about Coronium. What's going on in the world of Coronium?
1.7 is out, so I'm just we got some more people beta testing, which is nice. We're getting some more feedback, which is always helpful. People breaking it and whatnot. But yeah, there's some neat stuff in there, some networking stuff for attaching to external APIs, which kind of is neat, and some templating stuff that will become more obvious in the next couple versions on some of the new stuff you can do. But it's going to be really neat. And I'm also already kind of started working on 2.0, but I'm going to kind of keep that under wraps for right now. But there's some neat stuff happening for Coronium too.
That's a tease, man. And we're going to do 2.0, but we're not going to talk about that right now.
Yeah. I woke up one morning and it all became clear to me what I should be doing. So. But still going to be spending a little bit of time on the version now. Some user management stuff a lot of people are asking for, so going to get that in there. And then also too, still in version 1. Probably 9, is going to be WebSocket support. Some DMC in the Corona forums, he released a WebSocket client for Corona SDK, which is super cool. And so I'm going to be supporting that in Coronium with the WebSocket, as well as looking into building in a Mosquito server as well to do kind of the Internet of Things stuff, because that's still a hot topic. So there's actually, can't announce this yet, but there's some people, person in general specifically, who is actually using Coronium on a Raspberry Pi. So there's doing some interesting stuff with that. So we'll see how that progresses, but there's some neat stuff coming on, so we're trying to keep it current.
Oh, that's very cool. That's very cool. I was actually this weekend. It's kind of funny that you say that. I was looking at some examples of using Node.js on Raspberry Pi. So here we got a good Coronium/Lua, example of. Right, I'm assuming that's using Lua.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's very cool. I think that's great. So good. We'll look forward to seeing that. So you guys, if you want to check that out, go over to coronium.io, and Chris has got all the directions that you need there to get started, either using it on Amazon Web Services or on DigitalOcean. And of course, Chris, can you download that and run it on your own server if you wanted to?
You can do if you follow the DigitalOcean instructions, you can install it on a CentOS box. Right now, that's pretty much the supported version. But if you want to, some people have actually kind of hacked the installer, so you can actually download that, and you can make it work for somebody got it working on Arch Linux. So it's you can do that too. It's all there. The script is just one big text file that you can dig around in if you want to. So.
Oh, very cool.
But yes,
So
you can put it on your own server.
I can see how this is so modular that you could just about pretty much bolt on anything that you wanted.
That's the idea. Yeah.
Yeah. That's very cool. Well, something else that's very cool is Liquid Fun. Have you guys seen Liquid Fun?
Mm.
I want to see.
I do know what you're talking. Is that in?
Not yet. I wanted to
I'm
see
looking forward to that. So Liquid Fun's the add-on to the physics engine, right?
Yeah, right. So I wanted to see your face when I said that. So yeah, basically.
Yeah, I'm totally looking for that.
Oh yeah. I posted
As we say, I'm jonesing for that feature. I've been waiting because that's doing Liquid's hard, man.
Well, for anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, basically Google has done an implementation of a fluid particle system, or basically fluid bodies. What is it? Here, I'm just going to read it right off the thing here. It says it adds a particle-based fluid and soft body simulation to the rigid body functionality in Box 2D. So basically, it's like Box 2D on steroids. Is another way to say it, I guess. It's probably an inaccurate way to say it, but if you can imagine, if you go over to their website or if you just Google for Liquid Fun and go to the Google GitHub repo, they actually have some videos over there, and they show kind of this idea of like a comparison where you've got like a box that falls from the sky, and it falls and it hits the ground and it kind of does its normal thing, and then you have almost what looks like a blob of chained items are kind of all together, and then they just kind of fluidly move around. And so basically what's happening is Corona is working on implementing Liquid Fun into the SDK. So basically we'll have not only the Box 2D implementation, but we'll also have the Liquid Fun, or the soft body aspects of things. So that's coming soon. We're kind of working on it. It's kind of behind the scenes, but yeah, what do you guys think about that?
Awesome.
Awesome.
I'm going to let Chris go first because I always drown everybody out. So go, Chris.
Oh no, I think it's going to be cool. I actually posted that a while ago when I first saw it, and I'm wondering if they've actually worked on it because of that post.
Yeah. Well, see. Yeah, I don't know. It's always kind of one of these things where I show up at the team meetings, and they're like, somebody starts mentioning things like Liquid Fun. I'm like, what is that? So I gotta start googling it and finding out. But yeah, so I imagine they pull a lot of stuff from the community suggestions.
I don't mean to put any pressure on the dev guys, but I'm sure that I saw some release notes that alluded to work going on the Liquid Fun integration, just that it's not ready yet.
Right.
Not
right.
exposed yet.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's one of those things that it's all got to be tested and made sure that everything works well together and all that kind of stuff like that. But yeah, some people have noticed little notes here and there about Liquid Fun and things like that. So
generating a little excitement there when people see that. For those of us who actually read the release notes on almost daily basis.
Yeah, I'm always watching those too.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Some people, you can't. And then there's people who are just sort of like, they like to pick apart what's going on in the SDK. So even if it's not in the release notes, they're kind of like they see something and they're like, hey, what is this? Yeah. which is great. So yeah, we're looking forward to that. So I don't have a date on when it'll actually be released, but it's being worked on pretty actively and should be available soon. So very cool.
Ready. I don't know what exactly, but.
Yeah, well, then we also, the other part of that, which is kind of always an interesting side of this, the other side of the conversation is that we can't always just throw things out, right? Just like, hey, now you got Liquid Fun. You have to have documentation or tutorials or something that goes along with it. Now, Google has done a great job of providing their own documentation on Liquid Fun, but we have to come up with some examples and some tutorials that say, hey, here's how you would use it, in this environment. So we're working on that as well. So those need to be ready at the same time, or thereabouts. All right. Well, I think that's it for kind of community announcements and things like that. Let's get into talking about Composer and calendar events and things like that. You guys ready to talk about that?
Yes, with my microphone on this time.
you had your head shaking.
I try to be, nice and
I
like
was like,
mute it, and then I have something to say, I forget I don't have it on.
Foghorn Leghorn, man.
People watching the video think I'm totally weird. But, all right.
I can't hear you, but your brain's rattled, boy.
Yeah, I wish they had a little keystroke for the microphone. That'd be kind of cool. Mute and unmute quickly.
Yeah, I know. The buttons, the controls on Google Plus, if you're watching, we've said this a number of times, the controls need to be bigger. There needs to be like a big old nasty buttons that say mute and stop and start. So anyway. All right, well, let me flip over, see if I can flip my screen over here. We had some problems with this last time, but I think it was user error. Let's see, which screen do I want to show? That's a good question, right? I guess we'll do this one. You guys tell me if you can see my screen. It was probably going to be the Hangout like a zillion times. Okay, that probably wasn't the best idea. That's not the screen I want. Okay, pardon me, you guys. I want that screen. Yes? No? Let me get that off there. Okay, better. One screen was the Google Hangout, which gave us an infinite house of mirrors, and the other one is my screen. Can you guys see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the Composer GUI. So anybody doesn't know what we're talking about there, we've got basically, just like it sounds, there's a editor, a visual editor that we can use to set up scenes and test things out, test out ideas, and do scene management, stuff like that. It's kind of a companion to the Scene Composer API. It's in beta, so not everybody has worked with it or seen it, but there is some information over on the Corona Lab site in the daily docs and stuff like that. So I will definitely be sure to put a link to it, and if you haven't had a chance, go check it out. But it's basically, if you go into the daily builds and you have, you can bring up Composer and you can kind of mess with it. So let's just bring it up. Let's see here. Let me look at what I want to do here. So let's go to the Composer. We'll go to the Hangout here. Let me bring this up. Nope, that's not the version I wanted. Sorry, hold on. I have a specific version I want to play with. And it's just the one that I know works the way I want it to work. Okay, so when you open up this sample project, there's a Aliens versus Mutant Mice Master. There's a sample project that goes along with this tutorial. Basically what it does is it kind of gives you a blank Corona Composer GUI starter template. And so with the simulator open, if you go to Corona Composer, it will pop open something that looks like this, which is basically an editor, visual editor that kind of mirrors what you're seeing on your device. So let's see here. Bring up. So there you go. Got those two together. You can get rid of this. So all you have to do is select the objects that are on the screen, and you can.
Can it resize the screen now?
What's that?
Can it resize the screen you're working on now?
I don't. That's a good question. I'm not working in the latest and greatest version of it, so I know that there were some things about resizing the canvas size, maybe, or zooming, or things like that. I don't think that I'm working with that version yet, but that's definitely something that.
I'll have latest daily. I'll try.
What's that?
I'm running latest daily of Corona, so I'll try to run it and see.
Yeah, try there. For the purposes of the demo, I wanted to make sure that I was working with a version that was, because it's beta. We want to make sure I was working with kind of a stable version that I didn't have to fumble through too much. But
it does resize.
It does. Cool.
Yes.
All right. Well, so like I said, you get your basic this template project that was here for you is in part of the tutorial. So let's just kind of like. What we'll do here is we'll let's hit play here, and we can see that basically we get some physics interaction. We've got the Corona logo, we've got a ground, and we've got some text on the screen. And when we hit the play button, the ball falls to the ground. Just for the people who are listening to the podcast and may not necessarily watching the video. So it's pretty straightforward. Most of the objects here on the side bar, you can like create additional objects. So if you wanted to create a little platform or something, you could do that. If you wanted to create a little ball here, you could do that. And then, of course, if we hit play again, each one of those objects, the physics engine isn't enabled for those objects, so they don't really do anything. But if you go and select one of those objects and go to the physics panel over here, you can enable physics for it. It's set to dynamic by default, so if you hit play again, then that becomes a physics object. So it's pretty straightforward. One of the things that I thought was interesting is that right here is a edit physics body. So if you want to edit the physics body itself, you can kind of do that and come in and put additional points, align those out. So if you needed a shape that wasn't like a, if you needed a different size shape or something like that, you could do that. And of course, I think this is going to kind of, yeah, see now the ball falls differently because the points on the ball are changed. So it's, like I said, pretty straightforward. So if you click on the canvas itself, then you wind up with, let's see here, what was I doing before? Did I do that before? I thought if you click the canvas itself, it would let you change colors.
You need to press the cog at the top.
The where? Who where?
The cog at the top.
Oh, the cog at the top. Thank you. That's right. Okay. See, there's some, and this is part of the beta process. There's some things that, like, as we use this ourselves, kind of eating our own dog food, there's like, hey, I think that this needs, and we send emails back and forth to each other. Yeah, so click on the cog here, and then you can change the background color of the canvas. If you want to do that, you can name things. So I can name this as scene, like by default it's just scene 1. Set the height and the width of it, and then the same thing applies for, like, if I come in here and I select like a ball, like that ball, I can go back and I can name that ball. And the reason that's important is because if we look at the project itself, what the the Composer GUI is doing is it's actually creating this scene file, which is basically like a big JSON file. And then within our Lua file itself, there's also a Lua file. So our scene1.lua, if we open that up, we wind up with, let's see if I can bump this up a little bit. We wind up with our scene code, so our hide and our show and all that kind of stuff like that. So there are places here where we might want to be able to address objects that are already named. So let's take a look at that. Let's show you what I'm talking about there. So if we go back to this final here, I have this scene, or this project is already kind of lined out. So let's close this. Nope. And I'll open this Corona Composer with this project. So basically what this is kind of the final version of the, was it Aliens versus Mutant Mice or whatever the project name is here. So at the end, you can kind of shoot the ball off and knock things down. In this project, so let me go flip back over to the code here. In this project, if we look at that same scene.lua, what we wind up with is that we're actually in the scene show. After the did phase, we're actually going to go in and address these objects by their name. So there's a plasma ball and there's a UFO 1, and then based on what we're doing, we want like a plasma 1, which is the plasma ball. We want to apply a force to it, and we want to shoot it off into the objects across the screen. So kind of just to recap that, if you are here, let's say you are down here at the bottom, you are on the plasma ball. So if we scroll down, we can find the plasma ball. Then we can go to up here, and we can name that object. So we name it plasma, and then in our code, we can address that by name. Is that all making sense so far? Okay. You guys are all on mute. Okay.
Everybody's unflipping their mute and their stuff.
That's all right. That's cool. There's also an assets library over here, so let's work with the final project here. There's an assets library here where if we wanted to, we could bring in additional objects, and then we can size those objects if we wanted. If we wanted to, we can rotate them, move them around. Of course, you'd want to, you probably want to have your graphics already all set up, and you're basically just bringing them in. But you could set one like we could put this over here. Size it. So I'm putting basically a soda can on top of a trash can. We can kind of size it, and then if we look down here at the bottom on our timeline, we've got an ordering of things. So like right now, my soda can is almost behind. I think it's behind the trash can. So if I wanted to, I could reorder that so that the trash can, or the soda can, is above the trash can. So if we go here and just drag it up, then we can change the order of things. So see if I can find my soda can. There we go. There we go. So now the soda can is on top of the trash can instead of behind the trash can, which is kind of what you want. And again, if you go into an object and go into Object Inspector, go into the Physics tab here, and then edit the physics body, you can change the shape of the mouse if you needed to. Like in this example, one of the things you run into early on is that the mouse actually has a tail, and that little tail sticks all the way out here to the edge. So that kind of gets in the way. So what you want to do is kind of select him, edit the physics body, and then bring everything tight into just the body of the mouse, because the tail can kind of hang off without it really affecting the rest of the scene. The other neat thing that the tutorial shows you how to do is basically, these are the same ship, so you're just the same UFO, so you're just taking and you're sizing one down to give it sort of a depth perception. So you've got this idea that one's kind of farther away from the scene than the other one. And then if we move this ship, there's actually the plasma ball is kind of sitting right here, and it looks like it's just kind of hanging out in midair. But what it's actually doing is let's go ahead here and find the plasma ball. It's actually sitting on a platform. Let's see here. Yeah, it's sitting on a platform, and that platform. And I've been messing with this project, so it's probably not actually sitting on the platform. But the platform is got its alpha set to 0. So basically, you can't see it. So if we went up here and set the alpha to 1. We'd be able to see our platform again. So the ball is really just sitting on top of the platform. The UFO is sitting on top of the ball, and then when we click the UFO in our code, it tells to apply force to the plasma ball, and that's what shoots the plasma ball off. But it's actually just shooting the plasma ball off of that platform. So it's kind of just kind of a visual trick. But the important parts of that is that you can go in and you can set alpha on things. You can change the strokes of things. You can also change the size of things. So like one of the things that I noticed early on was that on the road has physical boundaries. So if you went in and edited the body again, you could kind of cut that road in half, and then when you set objects on the road, then it looks like they're actually setting on the road. Same thing goes for if you want to change the transform an object. So if you want to change the size of an object, like right now, if I'm going to go in and kind of mess with this road, it's only going to, right now the editor kind of only lets you go so far with that. But if you wanted to, you come in here and you could actually physically change the height and say, okay, I want it to be 10. And then you could just kind of manually massage what's going on there. So that's kind of a quick little look at it. There, like I said, there's a whole tutorial over here on the Corona Live's website. It goes through everything. There's a video that kind of shows the whole tutorial being gone through from beginning to end. And then this explains everything like the project files, and then it goes through and actually tells you how to edit the code. And there's a whole section here that walks you step by step, about putting your background in, putting your all your scene objects in, and then going in and actually adding interactivity and things like that. So if you want to walk through that in its entirety, you'll get a real good picture of what's going on and how you can use it. So there's a few other features, like you can lock groups or lock layers. You can lock groups. You can add groups. So if I wanted to, I could add a group, and then I could put objects in the group. So so you could just do that, and it's pretty straightforward. I think. Let's see here. Oh, sorry. I'm trying to put a group in an object. That doesn't work. Got to put an object in the group, and then you can kind of close them up, and you can hide things as you would expect. So that's kind of cool. So there you go. That's kind of a first look at it. It's like I said, still in beta, still being developed. There's lots of different features that are being requested and stuff like that, and that we're working on. So, but I think it's a good first start. What do you guys think? Any questions?
No, that's good.
Nope.
That's cool.
Pretty straightforward, I think.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of old school Flash.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of people have said that, and I agree. You know, it just has that same kind of feel to it. But you know, I mean, it's one of those things where when something, you know, I mean, there's only really one way to do something, right? I mean, the timeline concept is the timeline concept. You know, so.
Yeah, that's cool. It's nice to be able to visually move stuff around. It makes it a lot, you know, if you're a visual type person, it's just a lot easier.
Yeah, I think so too. Now it's got the built-in kind of like preview here, but as you make changes, those changes get reflected on your device as well. So if I were to move, you know, like this, and then save it, and then so everything, you know, gets moved around as well. So. So if you kind of you really want to get more of a interactive feel, you know, like you do on your device, then you can kind of mess with something, hit save, and then it's going to just show up. The changes are going to show up on your device. So very cool. All right, enough of that. We'll put a link in the show notes to that, so you guys can go check that out. The other one that we're going to look at here is adding events to iOS calendar. Now, this actually came out of a forum discussion, and Abdul asked about being able to do something where you can, in your app, someone could add events to their iOS calendar. And the short answer was that Corona doesn't have the access to the calendar, but you could do something like that in Corona Enterprise. But somebody said, well, wait a minute. There's a creative way that you could do that, and that would basically be using a server. You could essentially compile all your information on your device, make a remote call to the server, and then have the server, and then download the event from the server, and then basically iOS says, hey, there's a calendar event, and would try to add it to your calendar event. So it's kind of a round trip way of going about things, but Abdul came in and posted something here that's basically a skeleton project that has kind of the app itself, and then a PHP script that goes on your server that basically just takes in the let's look at it over here. It's a little formatted a little differently over here. It basically takes in your variables that you pass to it, and then sends that back as an ICS file, which is the file that iOS is looking for in order to create an event. So let's kind of step through this here. I think it's an ingenious little idea. So basically, in your Corona app, what you're going to do is you're going to collect information from somebody in some way, right? There's going to be some kind of user interface, some way that you're going to set an event. For the purposes of this demo, we're just going to do real bare bones concepts, so we're going to hard code everything. So what we're going to do is we're basically creating a settings table with the variables that we need. So we need the start of the event, the end of the event, a name, a description, and where it's located. And these are just some basic things that you would want to show up in an event on an iOS calendar. There is and actually there is a tutorial for this, which I will link to in the show notes. And there are a whole host of variables that you could set that iOS accepts and uses. and there's a link to that format in the tutorial itself. So, but for our purposes here, we're just going to set those 5 things. Then what we do is we create an empty object or an empty table, and then we just set those as parameters. So basically, just grabbing those values that we already set, putting them into this parameters .body, and then we're going to tag that on to the end of a string here, or basically creating a whole URL with query string parameters on it. So essentially, we're just kind of setting this all up so that it's easy to make a network call to. So at some point here, we say open URL, so system.open URL, and we pass it in the URL that we want to access along with the query string parameters that we want to use. That goes off to wherever we've told it to. So in this case, I've actually set it to my server, and it's actually calling a PHP file, which does really not a whole lot, but a lot all at once. Basically, what it does is it grabs those parameters out of the query string, and then there's a class here that has 2 functions in it. One basically just takes in all the information that we've passed in and builds, again, another, just basically a string of information. And then when we do the show, we call the show function gets called down here. We basically build out our headers and put everything that we need in order to do a return trip to the device. And so we put in an attachment of whatever our name is. So we've got our start time, our end time, our name, our description, our location, and the name is the name of the event. So the name of the event becomes name.ics, and that, along with the data, which is the start time, the end time, the description, location, all that kind of stuff, all that gets returned and sent back to the app. And all that happens here because we've created, out of this class, we create an event, and we call event.show, and that sends it back to the app. And when we do that, let's see here, when we do that, it's going to create an event. So let me pop back over here to the calendar event project. And so it kind of flashed there, but so basically what happens is that it's calling the project. When I open it up in the simulator, it's making that call to the PHP file, and then over here in the local browser, it's actually downloading this event.ics file. So if we look at that in our text editor, it basically returns this. Hi, Barry. I think I'm gonna mute Barry. Barry's having a Barry Manilow. Is it Barry Manilow? Not Barry Manilow. What's the Al Green? What's the one? You know, the thing where the
Barry White.
Barry White. Okay, Barry Manilow moment. Barry's having a Barry moment.
Barry's probably laughing so hard now he can't turn his camera on.
It's crying. That's right. Oh man. Okay, so it creates this test event.ics file, which gets downloaded to the device. So if I were ambitious, I would actually try to open that up on my device, which I think I can do. If you guys give me just a second here. I'm going to use Reflector. I don't know if you guys have seen this app, Reflector, but it's super cool. I think we've used it a number of times here on the show. Come on. Okay, it's up. And then all you have to do is go to your device. You go to your sharing. Do you have to have your device open, or you have to be on the same network?
While you're doing that quickly, I'd just like to apologise, but that was actually Fleetwood Mac.
Right. We're all just playing off your name, Barry. Barry. Who is singing to us in the background there?
Sorry, the next time I'll make more of an effort. Yeah, it's a missed opportunity.
Do Barry White for us next time.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's too funny. You've used this before,
Just,
right?
you know.
Haven't you used this before, Ed?
Oh, sure, put it on me.
Yeah, no.
Uh,
You're my save.
yeah, so you're running on your actual physical device now?
I am running on my physical device, but it doesn't give me
Slide up
the
to the
air.
bottom.
Yep, it doesn't give me the AirPlay.
Oh, AirPlay's not showing up? Then you're a
No.
host. What?
That I'm a host. Okay, well, anyway, here's the deal. I'll just describe it. It's not as pretty,
You
but
should get a little.
basically, here's what happens. If I click on this event.ics file, what happens is, if you were on your device, it would look something like this. It would try to open it up in your iCal on your device, and then you could add an event to your so right there, test event has been added to my local calendar, which is on my desktop, but it's the same concept on your device. So essentially, like again, just to recap, when you open like in this test environment, when you open the device, open the project, it goes out to the server out on the internet, calls that PHP file, and then from that is returned this ICS file, which then opens the iCalendar on your device, and then from there you actually have to save the event if you want it to stick. But that's pretty straightforward. So to the end user's perspective, all they're doing is they're flipping through your app, doing whatever they need to do, and then when they hit do, it just pops over to calendar, and now they've added an event to their calendar. So kind of a cool thing. So if you want, I will put a link to that in the show notes, and you can go take a look at that, check it out. Everything is there. The only thing that I ran into that's not in the tutorial, and I probably should put a link to it in the show notes as well, put it up on GitHub, is, and actually put a link, I'm sorry, I actually made a note in the forums, was that, let's see here, in one of these files, yeah, in main.lua, I actually added the socket.url library, because what was happening was, for things like the settings.name and the description, I was running into an issue where basically spaces were messing things up. So the characters there weren't being escaped properly. So when you sent your information across, it was becoming like a %20 or something like that for a space. And so to fix that, I just went in and put in socket.url and then url.escape, and then that kind of fixes everything, makes everybody play well together when you're creating that final string that's going to be passed along to the server. Okay. I think, let's see here. Okay, so the last thing we're going to talk about is creating a sharing panel. So let me open the project for that as well, just so we can get an idea of what we're talking about here. I'll just close this. So there was another tutorial that happened before this one, and it was actually on creating sliding panels. So if you hadn't had a chance to go check that out, go do so. We're not going to necessarily cover all of that here, but in the sliding panels tutorial, basically you're doing just that. You're creating a panel that will slide out, from the left, right, top, bottom, whatever, and then you can put objects inside of that sliding panel. So if you want to put buttons inside of it, or video, or whatever, I mean, I don't know that it goes to that detail in the tutorial, but the point is it gets you a sliding panel. So the follow-up tutorial to that was actually creating a sharing panel, which is basically a sliding panel with a table view inside of it. So let me see if I can find my notes over here. Okay. So let's see here. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, this is okay. And one of the things I want to say is this is for iOS. So I think that in Android something like this already exists, but for iOS we need a way to create a sharing panel. And then in the sharing panel, you can put whatever you want in there. But the tutorial, I keep running. the tutorial puts your most basic things in there, like Facebook, Twitter, email, that sort of thing. So let's go back in here to the project and go to sharing panel. I'll open it up so that we can see what we're talking about. It might be a little hard
to turn on the video.
Oh, did it not come back on?
No.
Huh. Let's see. Where am I? You can't see my video? Can you other get to the rest of you see my video? No?
Yeah, I can see it.
You can see it. Okay. Sergey, you can't see it?
Oh, I can see it right now.
Oh, you can see it now.
Just
okay.
now.
Okay, just now. I guess it was off before. Okay. So here's what it looks like. So we got a sharing panel. When we start the project up, if I refresh the simulator, you can see that the little sharing panel pops up there. You get your Facebook, your Twitter, email, messages, things like that are pretty common that you'd want to be able to share. And you could, if you wanted to, you could, of course, make this portrait, and you could share it. But for the purposes of this tutorial, it's all landscape. So let me pull up my notes again. They keep disappearing. Okay. So in order to do this, you will need a couple of things. One is you would need the Show Pop-Up API, and you would need the social plugin. So if you don't have that, these are like premium features for Pro and Enterprise subscribers. So if you don't have that, if you're just using the starter or the basic, you would need to kind of compensate for that in some way. So you either need to rewrite some aspects of the Show Pop-Up, come up with a different way of doing that, or for Twitter and for Facebook, you would have to make accommodations there as well. So to just know that. And for the purposes of the tutorial, those plugins are not included. So even if you have Pro and you run this, you set this up on your device and you run it, you're gonna see that the Facebook and the Twitter functionality doesn't work because the tutorial doesn't go that far. So you would need to implement those plugins and do all the hooks and things that you need to do. This is really just focused on getting you the sharing panel itself constructed. Okay. So like I said before, this is you need to go back and look at the new panel if you'd like. This is basically a table view inside of the sliding panel. And so let's go ahead and just kind of look at the code itself, and that'll help us walk through everything that's going on. So I've kind of folded everything up here, and we'll look at it all in just a moment. But basically, if we look at the code, what we've got is you need to include your widgets, of course, because you're going to be creating a table view and all those types of things. Then we've got two functions that are for creating the new panel, which was covered in the previous tutorial, and also creating a new sharing panel, which we'll look at in just a moment. Once we've got that, we create our share panel, which is basically from our widget.new sharing panel, which we've just defined here, and then we're going to show it. So as you notice, when we first run the project, it just automatically shows. So normally you wouldn't do that. Of course, you'd have a button or something, some kind of action. Somebody would click on something, tap on something, and then the sharing panel would show. But for the tutorial, here we are. We're just going to show it. And conversely, if you wanted to, you could actually take the comments off of this, and you could save that, and then the sharing panel would go away. So in 2 seconds there, it shows itself, and then in 2 seconds later, it goes away. So they kind of give you an example of how would you make it go away. So let's just put that back because we don't want it to go away. Okay, so let's dig into the new sharing panel. So if we took just a brief look at new panel, which was the previous tutorial, basically new panel is just for showing and hiding a panel. That said, there's quite a bit to it, and the tutorial is fairly in-depth, so like I said, we won't go through it. But once we've got that, we can then create we can then take and stick our table view into our new panel, our sliding panel. So let me just expand this a little bit. So the first things that I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to collapse these two rows just to show you that we've got two functions. We've got our on-row render and we've got our on-row touch. So when this thing loads, we basically want to figure out what does it look like, how is it structured. So in our case, we've got everything's kind of like centered in the middle. So Facebook, Twitter, email, all the words are just kind of centered in the middle of the panel. And then what do we want to happen whenever we tap on something? And we'll get to that in just a minute. So from there, we can create our new panel, and we can set the location of it. So if we wanted to, we could have this at the top, which would put the sharing panel at the top. We could put it left, right, that sort of thing. So you can kind of control that. We can also control the height and the speed of it. So if we wanted this to come in like, I don't know, like really slow, and we could say, ooh, kind of slide in really slow. So there's some variables here to be able to affect how it, what it looks like and how it functions. So let's set that back to 500. We can also adjust the easing out and in and out, how we want it to look and how we want it to react that way as well. Then the next part is just setting up the table view itself. So if we were to collapse that, well, I don't think that really helps. If we were to collapse that, we would be able to see some other things. But basically in our table view, we've got, just like we always do, we set up our events for row render, row touch, where we want it to be located, what do we want it to look like as far as a background, things like that. And then once we've kind of got it positioned and created and positioned, then we can go in and start inserting our rows. So we stick our table view into our panel. Like I said, it's just going to be a slide. This is basically a slide-out panel with a table view inside of it. And then after that, we go in and we start inserting our rows. So the first row here is just kind of a share category row, which is just kind of a label almost. And then after that, we get into creating things for Facebook, Twitter, email, that sort of thing. So we can kind of go in here and see that we also assign some parameters to it. We put in pop-up name, service, what the label will actually say, and then any other features that we want of that particular service. And that will become very useful in just a moment when we look at the on row touch, where we say, okay, based on what we touched, what do we want to happen? So we take and we insert each of our rows. Kind of go through here. Here's one for email. So if you wanted to, you could actually make attachments to things if you wanted to. There's you just have to see the API documentation for that. And that's pretty straightforward. So you've done all that. You return your panel. You're done. And then if we go back up here to on row touch, what happens is that now we define what happens whenever we touch something. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to grab out of the event, we're going to grab that pop-up name and the service that we selected. So anytime that we touch something, those two values are going to come back, and then what we're going to do is we're going to figure out what was it that we touched, and based on that we're going to do something else. So if we go back to our example, look here, there's Facebook, Twitter, email, and message. Each one of those, if we tap on one of those, will produce a pop-up dialog box with its own corresponding set of actions like send or cancel or whatever. The only one that doesn't have something like that is the cancel option itself. It doesn't actually have a pop-up dialog, so there's no cancel button for the cancel button. So what we have to do is we essentially say all of these guys have conditions where we can check the pop-up name and figure out what's going on, but we don't have that with the cancel. So we assume that if there's a touch event here and there's no pop-up name, then basically we're assuming that it's the cancel option, and we're just going to handle that. So it's kind of a creative way of taking care of something that doesn't have an action for it. So then when we get into things like mail and SMS and social and stuff like that, what we're doing is we're looking at the pop-up name to see what it was that was selected. So in this case it's mail, so then we're going to show pop-up, and we're going to show whatever pop-up name it was. So we're going to do our normal mail kind of stuff. Same thing for SMS. And then when we get in here to social, basically what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, it's a pop-up name. Okay, great, it's a social pop-up. Bo, but what kind of service was it? And then so then we try to figure out, if it was what service was it for, and then handle that. So whether it's Twitter or Facebook, and then we show the appropriate pop-up for that. And then if we don't have, if we're in the simulator or we don't have something configured, like I said, if you run this example right out of the box, the plugins for the social are not there. So basically, it will think that your device is not configured properly, and it'll bring back this message that says, your device is not configured. Please set up your account, or either that or you're having network problems, blah blah blah. And it'll kind of give the user some sort of feedback as to what they think they should do. And that's pretty much it. I mean, once that, like I said, it looks like it's a lot of code, for it's not a lot of code, but it's kind of hard to break down when you first open it up. When I first opened it up, I was like, whoa, But once you start chunking it, you say, oh, okay, well, we get the row render, which handles how it looks. Got the row touched, which handles what we do. Then you create the new panel. Then you're sticking your table view inside of it. And then you're adding your rows to your, once you start kind of chunking it, you're like, oh, okay, this is easy to wrap your mind around. And then that's it. Like you said, once you start collapsing these things, you're like, okay, well, you require the widgets, you create your panel, you do your new sharing panel, you instantiate it, you show it, you're done. So I will put a link to that in the show notes as well. And there's also I will link to the build settings, because I don't know if you guys noticed, but this was, like I said, was in landscape and not portrait. So if you wanted to, you could actually go in, to your build settings, put in portrait or portrait upside down, whatever you wanted, and you could adjust that. Now, when you do that in the simulator, of course, it doesn't adjust. So you would need to put the setting in the build settings so that it would do portrait, and then you would have to go in and adjust how these are all set, because right now this is all set for landscape, and it looks crazy, but you could easily account for that in portrait mode. All right, any questions? Did anybody have any comments? Anything they noticed, or no? Okay.
So quiet today.
I know, it's very quiet. That's okay. Some days are quiet like that. So the one thing that I did do, and you'll notice if you run the tutorial, so if you go into the tutorial, at the bottom, very, very bottom, there is a sample project that you can download, and basically just open it up and right-click on main and open it up and take a look. But what I did was I went in and actually bumped up the size of things, because it's really the example itself is kind of small, which, if depending on your form factor, if you're doing it on an iPad, might be appropriate. If you're doing it on an iPhone 5, it might seem a little small. So what I did was I basically just went in and I just went in and bumped up the font size and bumped up the box and all that. And the one thing that I will say that I had to kind of fiddle with was here in the new sharing panel. Was it in there, or was it all in the other panel as well? It may have been down here. One of the things I had to do is I had to adjust the size of the table view. Yeah, here it is. And in the new panel, when I created the new panel, basically I had to adjust the size of it as well. So you kind of have to, you wind up kind of, because remember, you've got a table view inside of a panel, and then the table view, each row has a height. So once you say, well, hey, I want the font to be bigger, then everything kind of gets crowded, then you need to change the rows, and then you need to change the size of the table view, and then you need to change the size of the panel. So live in the house that Jack built. So you got to kind of figure all those things out. But it wasn't that hard. Those values are pretty easy to kind of just massage and fiddle with. So that's it. All right. And that's about it. That's a look. So that is a look. Then kind of recap. Told you what we were going to talk about when we started, and I'm going to tell you what we just talked about. We talked about Composer GUI, calendar events.
You followed the I make a speech checklist.
Yes, I did. Does anybody have questions? No questions? All right.
I have a few words about Facebook integration. I was struggling with. I can share a few thoughts. So
yeah. Yes.
So as you may noticed, Recently, Corona has changed the Facebook plugin for Corona, and now it works a little bit different. It was mentioned before, but now it's efficiently, strictly that you have to ask for basic permissions first when you call in Facebook login, but it kind of works and kind of not works. If you check the implementation Facebook guide on Corona Labs documentations, you can see there that when they call in Facebook login, they supply all the permissions in a string with comma delimiter. It's like quote, publish actions, comma, email, end of quote. And this is wrong. It will kind of work when you call a lot of permissions. When you put a lot of permissions in that way, they will eventually show up in the authorization window on Facebook, but Corona will crash or will not work properly. So you have to split these permissions into single strings in a table. So in this Facebook login call, it must be a table of permissions of strings. So this is first thing that I was having trouble with. Another thing was that Facebook logout wasn't working, but Corona have fixed it, so it's cool. And on Android and on Facebook, on iOS, Facebook plugin doesn't work the same way. So you have to always check how it works on both platforms because it's not the same. Then I realized that I have to wait for some time before calling another Facebook request. For example, if you're calling Facebook login, then you want to fetch user's profile, and then you want to fetch for his friends. You have to set up a timer like 100 milliseconds before making the second call. Otherwise, my consequent requests wasn't being processed. So it's like I'm sending them and nothing getting from them. So that's another thing. And with permissions. Now, when you if you have a lot of permissions to use with Facebook, the first time you call login, it will show user-only basic permissions for your app, despite what you have put in the login call. But then, once user has authorized your applications, you have to check which permissions were granted. And you will call a request to the Facebook, which is me/permissions, and this returns you a JSON encoded table of all the permissions. You have to walk through them and check if all needed is present. If not, you have to ask the user to click login again and to grant additional permissions. For me, it works like this. First time I call login, it shows basic permissions. Second time, it shows some additional permissions. And the third time, it shows a window asking for publish actions. So it actually free Facebook windows to fully authorize applications. So this was important. And yeah, I was having a lot of time debugging because it partly worked. It worked on Android. It worked in somehow on Facebook, or with different setting, like in the guide, but it wasn't working to the full extent. So it was hard to notice. Another thing is that all the numbers, I think all the numbers must be encoded as strings when you're passing JSON encoded request to the Facebook, like for example setting score or some other value. So you might expect it to be a number, but instead it must be a string.
Okay, well, very cool.
That's all.
All right, well that's some good tips. Yeah, working with Facebook is a challenge. Just strictly on the fact that their API changes all the time, and then just like you say, so were you saying that you were having to delay the second call just based on network latency, or what do you think was the problem there?
I'm not sure, but it just didn't work without it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something on the Facebook side, or maybe it's something with my network. I'm not really sure, but I had to put it in.
What kind of like gave you the idea to put in a delay?
Yeah, how did you ever figure out that that was the solution?
Yeah, I think that's important. Let's talk about that for a second, because that's an important piece of troubleshooting. Is how do you figure out?
Well, I have a lot of web development experience. So I was a web developer, PHP, and some other stuff. So I thought maybe, well, it needs some time to cool.
Gotcha. Okay, so just sort of an intuitive aspect of things. Okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
That's interesting.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I can understand that.
I ran into just total side note that made I ran into a similar problem with a project I just submitted to the iTunes store, where you can make a game in the game and send it to people, and I used the zip plugin. And I don't know what I was thinking, but originally what I did was I did the zip and immediately tried to send the file, and of course, if it's a big file, the zip isn't quite done yet, and the whole thing crashed, or got half of a zip file. So similar in the sense that you had that latency that was like, you had to put that in there and to think, oh, this is going to take a moment.
Yeah.
There's actually a word on it. I have read an article where it explains that not all things happens in real time when you develop a program. So, and not all the stuff provides you a callback for.
Yeah. Well, typically, I thought to myself afterwards, I thought, the very fact that this thing gives me a callback so that I can tell when it's done is telling me that this is not going to get done right away. No guarantees. Duh. Oh, man.
There you go. Here's your sign.
There's my quote for the day. Duh.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for being here on this Memorial Day Monday, at least here in the U.S. So appreciate you spending the time with us. And we are going to be back here next week. I don't know exactly what we're going to talk about, but it definitely will be around Corona and app development. So be sure to join us here Monday, 12 p.m. Pacific, here on Google+. And until next week, have a great week and happy coding.
Cheers. Clicking the wrong buttons, but auf Wiedersehen.